we'll go ahead and get kicked off, and as others come in, we'll get them accepted and everything. Just want to be respectful of everyone's time. But again, want to thank SEMA again for some great sessions. Definitely brought a lot of attention to what we're doing here at the council, to what we're doing, and again, just for their support. I think I talked with my person. Now he's able to log into his computer and get all his stuff he needs. So thanks, Michaela and Alex and AD and the team over there for getting him ready to work. And it's important, and my wife is in the medical field, kind of dental field, and there's a lot of documents that have to go back. So she brought home her laptop with a lot of VM. You got to secure two-step authentication. I mean, and she just got this thing. So
right.
So I was just sitting there like, what is this? What is two-step authentication? Do I use a text? Do I use this? And so I was like, wow, this is a perfect time, because I've just never seen, and being around hospitals and dental and having a lot of access to people's records, it's even more. I can imagine, there, with what they do. So I'm gonna turn it over to you guys, and thank you again for all that you do and everything. So AD, go ahead and get us kicked off.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you once again. Good afternoon to everyone. I appreciate you joining us for the third of our fourth webinar series. As always, special thanks to Margot and Andrew for seeing the need to allow SEMA to host this webinar series called Thriving During and Post Pandemic. Also, I'd like to thank my boss, John Allday, for also having the vision to allow us to put this in place. So that's a tremendous thing. A little housekeeping, please, everyone, keep your mics off until the end of the session, unless you're speaking toward the end. We have a chat feature in place. Use that, engage in that anytime you want to. We have Michaela, who's our office manager and head of marketing, and she's in the background taking care of that. So I highly, highly, highly encourage you to use that. And also, this is being recorded, and at some point in time, Thursday or Friday, we can send the link out, a YouTube link, if you care to watch it again and again, or perhaps share it with your colleagues or what have you. Again, my name is AD Jenkins. I'm the sales manager for SEMA. Been in the IT environment for quite a few years. And like I've said before, I'm also the president of Irving ISD School District. So what we're talking about now, and basically how has COVID-19 impacted all of us. And I mentioned last week, and just for the new viewers, I'm going to talk about just a couple of things for a few minutes before we get into dive into what we're here to speak on. But we're talking about how it's affected us, and we were just talking about it before the call started. Shaking hands is something that doesn't exist right now. And embracing someone, attending parties, any type of gatherings or celebrations or what have you, that's gone by the wayside for right now. Things that we've taken for granted is things we can't do anymore at this point. We were just talking about schools earlier. We don't know what's going to happen with our schools. And me being the president, I don't know what's going to happen with that. And we were joking, talking about now we having to check homework. We have become the teacher, and we're thinking, are we smarter than a fifth grader at this point? But seriously, on the business side, it has been a major disruption. It has affected employees. People have lost jobs. It has affected the bottom line, which is revenue. And we've been forced to refine the way that we do business, how we communicate, how we collaborate. We had to adjust our strategies, and it's just been a time of transformation and what we call the new norm. So really our thoughts are just to change our focus a little bit and to think of ways that we can help and be a positive, something positive to you guys, because it's kind of easy to focus on things negative, but at this time this is our give back to saying, hey, this is how we can help. So and what we did, we created a series of topics that we thought that can benefit you during this time. And as I've always said, we don't necessarily have all the answers to anything, but we just want to share with you what we know, what our expertise is, and ways that we can help you during during this time. So, and we hope that this can minimize that disruption. So basically, but the end goal is to equip you with resources and thoughts and tools and tricks of things that you should know that can help you work smarter and more efficiently. So just to tell you a little bit about SEMA, we have two major pillars that we operate under, and that is first our, Alex, can you go back to the previous slide?
Mhm.
Okay, yes. We are a value-added reseller. So basically, as a firm, we resell customized products and services to end users, and that can be from anything such as hardware, installation services, consulting, troubleshooting, and other related products and services. And basically, we're born out of the vision, excuse me, to help business owners by reducing their cost of their technology infrastructure, and also to help businesses of all sizes streamline their IT operations and improve their system availability. But what's really important to us as SEMA is building relationships. Example, what we're doing now, and not just building relationships, but sustainable relationships and trusted relationships. And that's based on our integrity, that's based on expertise and speed. So what we're going to talk about today is security threats. I'm sorry.
Is now joining.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I was just hearing some. Today we're going to talk about security threats that we are facing today, and we also talk on tools and ways that we can mitigate risk. And if nothing else, at the end of the day, if this gets you to a point to where you start to have conversation with your IT department and the people that you're working with daily, we're doing our job. So what's going to be covered also is challenges with working remotely. We're going to talk on a little bit on common security terminologies, ways that we are attacked, ways that we can protect ourselves, how we can increase what we already have in place, and the conversation we don't like to have, but it's truthful, is just what to do if you are attacked. And finally, we will have some time for Q&A. Alice, can you go to the next slide? And just a slide about us, SEMA. We were founded in 2005. We are a proud member of DFW DC. We have locations here in Dallas as well as Austin, and we get a lot of work and have great relationship with the state of Arkansas. I did mention that we are a value-added reseller. On the next slide, I would just mention about our managed service provider. Go back, Alex, quick. And I just want to mention the partners that we have in place: IBM, VMware, HPE, Dell, Microsoft, Google. We're in the top 500 with managed service providers, as well as the top 250 with on the technical side. Okay, go ahead and to the next slide, Alex. So this is the last slide I want to just speak on before I introduce our speaker, and just give you just give you a screenshot of a typical business of any type. At the top, you can have a CEO and reporting to the CEO. The CEO could be the president of business partners or anyone in that making the decision maker, I should say. Then you may have a chief financial officer, a sales officer, operations person, research and development departments, HR, as well as a CIO, which is a chief information officer. And reporting to the financial person could be a controller, and reporting to them could be an AP clerk. On your sales side, you can have a sales manager reporting to the chief sales officer as well, and reporting to them can be a person from the inside outside representatives. But what I want to focus on is far to your right, your chief information officer there, because reporting on to them can be an IT director as well as a technician that you have in place. So, and so basically that's where SEMA, that's where we come in at. We become your IT department. So replacing everything in place, because you can have your most technical savvy person doing doing your IT work. So we become that part. So we become your CIO, we become your IT director, we become your technician. So we really just take over so you can focus on why you are really in business. So I just wanted to give you an illustration of how it's set up and how things sort of work. So Alice, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so this is what we're here to talk about. I'm going to turn it over to Alex Morrow, who's going to go into the security or cybersecurity part of it. Every time Alex and I work very close together, and every time we're talking to clients, I learn something more that I did not know just because of his in-depthness of things that he know about it. So you're in for a treat of just things that he's going to talk about. And like I said earlier, if nothing else, just to start some conversation, to talk to the folks that deal with the IT, just to make sure you are covered, because we are working differently today. So just a bio on Alex. Alex started in the IT at a very, I'm sorry, my voice is catching up with me. Alex started in IT at a very young age, designing website for small businesses while he was in high school. And while earning his business degree at the University of Texas at Dallas, he worked as a general manager of a small telecommunication company. So in 2009, he opened up his very own managed service company and later sold it to CIMA in 2007, and where he now works as our virtual CIO and leads our MSP team. His hobbies include taking walks and bike riding with his dogs, Bonnie and Buddy, and his family. He liked mountain bike riding and playing video games. And I will tell you this, if you want to know anything about the new Tesla cars that are coming out, Alex is your guy. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Alex, who would take it from here.
All right, very good. Thank you, AD. All right, so and AD, if you don't mind just muting your mic there. Thank you, sir. All right, so thank you all, everybody, for joining us today. My expertise is the cybersecurity, and I manage the team that really leads our managed services. So we have come across quite a bit, especially running my own company for 7.5 years and working with technology for as long as I have. We've seen just about everything for a lot of different companies, from the smallest companies to very large companies. Like AD mentioned, we work with state of Texas, state of Oklahoma, state of Arkansas, local cities, municipalities. So, hopefully, what we can bring to you today is just a little bit of some of the knowledge that we've come across, and some of the tips and tricks of what makes good cybersecurity practices. What I'm going to try not to do is just stick on the technical stuff. So I'm definitely a technical guy, and I will definitely try to keep it as high level as possible. But hopefully what you can get out of this is, not a list of terms and definitions, but really some talking points that you can have both within your organization and with your current IT staff, or with your current IT company. Of course, I've given this webinar. I've done this, in person. I've done it for a lot of different organizations and groups. Done, different variations of this. Generally speaking, cybersecurity is something that the best practices of cybersecurity definitely just passes straight into what we're dealing with today. Of course, what we're dealing with today is some additional challenges with working from home. With having your people work at home on their home computers, not being able to come into the office. How do we access those resources? So there's definitely some additional challenges. So I'll try to keep it as high level. Please, I know that sometimes some of this stuff, it may be common sense to me or something. I've been doing it for so long. If you have any questions, please use that chat function. Send those chats in, and I'll be glad to take questions at the end. So please don't hesitate. So, of course, just to start off with some of these challenges that we have from this working from home. One of the biggest challenges is you have people working at home on their personal computers. We don't know if these personal computers are protected. We don't know if they're secure. If we don't have our resources on them, then they could be potentially a gateway into your organization. So if you have people working from home that are working with, confidential company resources, confidential client information, personal information that we want to make sure does not get out into the world, into the dark web. So that is certainly a challenge that we have. Of course, as we move people to the cloud, and some companies have very quickly moved to the cloud that weren't in the cloud, sometimes that quick deployment can result in leaving holes open. Of course, and I can talk more about that, but if the cloud can be just as secure, and in most cases even more secure than on-premise resources, but if done improperly, just like any other technology, can really leave holes open to your organization. Accessing those office resources, we're talking about accessing files remotely. If not done properly, if not followed best practices, those resources could give a hacker access to your company data. In addition to, not necessarily just the hackers, but how are our employees managing our company and client data? Is it that now that they're home, maybe they don't have access to that network drive that they had at the office, and now they're emailing confidential information via unencrypted emails, for example. And so there's a lot of really things to think about and questions to think about as we move, as our employees have moved home. How do we make sure that our resources are secure, and that we're not being compromised by hackers? So these are some of the main challenges. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is more just general practices that are good practices now and moving into the future. So a couple just quick little definitions. Again, I told you I wasn't going to kill you with definitions, but these are just some of the hot topics, some of the main kind of things that we're seeing out there. Ransomware. A lot of people, hopefully you don't have personal experience with ransomware, but ransomware is essentially is a virus that comes in and encrypts all your data and then requests that you pay a ransom. And I'll talk a little bit more on ransomware on the next slide, but it is one of the biggest cybersecurity threats to businesses today. Phishing, of course, we all get phishing emails. Those come in a lot of different flavors. That is, hey, your account's been hacked. Click on this link that goes to this special website that we want you to enter your password in, and then they have your password. That's phishing for information. It may not necessarily be a password. It usually is, but they could be phishing for bank account information or something like that as well. Whaling is when they attack somebody that has access. This is sometimes the CEO or president, but we often see, accounting, somebody who has access to financials and those kind of things. These hackers can look up an organization.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Details about who's in charge of what departments, and then they'll specifically target those people. They've even been known to go look on social media and find out information from their kids or from a family member, and then send an email from a family member, spoof, going into the next one, spoof a family member to try to get information, and they'll let their guard down because they'll say, this is my wife that's asking for this information, let me give this to her. So they get very specific and they get very sophisticated. Spoofing, and we've got a little personal story, but spoofing is hey, this is the CEO. I need you to go get these gift cards. And we even had an experience with that in our office, Michaela, when she first started, and that's where a lot of people are like, oh, we wouldn't fall for these. Of course we wouldn't. But they get really sophisticated and they're very smart in their attacks. When Michaela first started, an email from a random Gmail came in and said it was John Alday and said, hey, I need you to go get these gift cards. Luckily Michaela reached out to try to get some more details, but it's often and that stopped it. It said, whoa, no, that's not our CEO. But when you have a new employee come in, they don't know if your CEO has another email or not. They think, oh, my CEO just emailed me from his personal email, and he's asking me to do this. I'm a new employee. Who am I to question my CEO? I'm brand new. I'm too scared to question my CEO. He tells me to do something. I'm gonna do it. I don't want to lose my job in my first week in business, and at the job. So you put all these things together, and it is very easy to fall for those things, and they happen all the time, and they're very sophisticated. You'll hear me talk a lot about multi-factor or two-factor authentication. This is something that is a cornerstone of cybersecurity policy today. Really, this comes down to the fact that passwords just aren't enough anymore. Passwords can be compromised. It only takes one bad site that you may not even know is bad. And often and I know we've all been guilty of this, we reuse passwords across multiple different websites. So one website gets compromised. Now they know your email address and password. They go try it on all your other sites. So just the password by itself, generally speaking, it's not a matter of if that password becomes compromised, but a matter of when. So two-factor authentication is essentially requiring an additional piece of information. You'll hear what you know, what you have, what you are. So what you know is a password. What you have may be a key card or something that you stick in the computer or something that you have to have, right? Or that cell phone that has that second code, or something you are like a fingerprint or a retina or something like that. But what that means is if your password gets compromised, you have to have another piece of information to access that information. So all of our systems that are secure, such as email, those kind of things, we're definitely going to recommend two-factor authentication, and I will go into that a little bit more. So those are just some high-level cybersecurity definitions. So I said I'd talk a little bit more about ransomware, and ransomware is something that every single organization has seen these problems. We have seen since ransomware first came out. I think it's about 2015 is when I first saw ransomware, and I remember it very clearly. A client that was not one of my clients, would talk to him about being a client. Ended up, doing his IT on his own, and he called me up. It was a small law firm, and he called me up late at night one night and saying, all my files, I can't access my files. Well, this was brand new at the time. He had gotten ransomware, and this law firm, all of his data was encrypted. We then in turn had to communicate with the hacker. We created a whole separate system just to communicate with the hacking organization, pay the ransom, get the decryptor back. Luckily, he was able to get his data back, but often the fine that they require you to pay, the Bitcoin that they require you to pay, is often only a very small cost. Often the amount of labor and time and downtime, as well as the amount of IT labor that requires to get you back up and running, is where the real damage comes into play. But what we're finding with ransomware, when they first started, it's evolved. When ransomware first started, and you can kind of see the ransomware damage cost back in 2015 was very small, and they were just blanketing everybody, just trying to hit everything, and they were asking for relatively very small ransoms. They were asking for $400, $500, and as a small business, you were like, $500 to get all of my data back? No brainer, right? It was an easy discussion. And so these ransomware organizations, and I say organizations because they are very rarely, they are organized, they have leadership, they have employees. You can go on the dark web and apply to work for these companies, and they offer to pay as much as $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year salaries to be a ransomware hacker for these organizations. So they are serious, and they are making a lot of money, as you can see. $20 billion in 2021 is expected for ransomware. So ransomware is not going away, and it has just become more targeted and focused. So what's happening now, as opposed to just blanketing everybody, they are specifically targeting an organization. They're creating ransomware for that organization. They are getting into that organization and deleting backups beforehand, so that they know by the time they encrypt your data, the backups are gone and they know they have you. So we are seeing ransomware requests of you see it on the news, $500,000 ransomware requests. And an organization, the insurance company, will come in and they'll pay it because the cost is the cost of losing 20 years of data, 30 years of data for an organization is often very more, more valuable than $500,000, for example. You're talking about all your accounting data. You're talking about all your client data. And so you'll see me talk a little bit later about, when those attacks happen, the chances of going out of business are very high. So we're definitely seeing targeted attacks. So there's a lot of steps that we need to take to prevent these attacks. And if they do happen, what do we do to recover from those? So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And if you haven't come across ransomware yet, hopefully you don't soon, but it is definitely something to think about and make sure that you have protections in place. And I'll talk a little bit more about those protections. So some of the other top attacks that you see out there, and this is, kind of get into some of my recommendations on training. There are so many different attacks out there that are hitting your employees on a regular basis. We see, hey, I'm sharing this file on ShareFile. You go to that shared file, and then that just takes you to another malicious website. We see, hey, you have this package. Please open this zip file, which quick little tip. If you get a zip file from anyone you don't know and you're not expecting it, don't open it. About 99% of times that zip file is a virus. So unless somebody actually told you, I'm going to zip up files and send them to you, do not open a zip file. So when you see those package deliveries, or it has an invoice, you'll see, they'll say, hey, I got this invoice. Clicking on that invoice often, those are one of the easiest ones because they're like saying, hey, it's been 60 days since you paid this invoice. Please click on this. That downloads a virus or ransomware to your computer. Tax fraud, verify your account. We even see, compromised MailChimp accounts or other accounts that mass mail from companies. So you'll see an email come from a legitimate company that's filled with virus because their account that sends emails was compromised. So you really have to be diligent.
Is now joining.
We even saw, this was big last year, the sextortion scams, hey, we hacked your webcam and we have information on you and we're going to send it to all your social media if you don't pay us $2,000 by the end of the day. Many of our clients, they forwarded that to us and we were able to, verify that it was a scam, but that's happening constantly. DocuSign, shortcut attacks. There's just so many attacks. I could probably talk all day long just on attacks, but we certainly don't have that much time. But these are some of the top ones that you're seeing, and I'm sure you've seen them in your inbox as well. So really, how do you protect yourself from all of these attacks? So I kind of, the first few slides there has been kind of doom and gloom, right? It's all of these attacks, all of these things happening. It feels like we're getting hit from every different direction. And cybersecurity 5-10 years ago, when I opened up my company, is completely different. Back then it was, as long as you had a good firewall and a good password on your email, you were in antivirus on your computer, you were pretty much okay. Today, that's not necessarily the case. There's so much more that we have to do because the hackers have evolved, and our technology and our processes of protecting our companies has had to evolve just as much. We are evolving our solutions every single year. We are constantly going to seminars and webinars and making sure that we're on top of the newest threats and what's happening, because if you don't, you fall behind and your company will be a victim to this. So what is a lot of people, they'll come up to me and say, Alex, what's that one thing that we can get? What's that awesome firewall? What's that antivirus that stops all of these problems? And the thing is, there is no magic bullet. There is no one thing that you can go buy tomorrow and you're good. If that was the case, then this webinar would consist of one slide, right? If I'd have one slide and say, go buy this one thing and you're good. Unfortunately, that's just not the world that we live in. It's about making sure that you have a layered approach. But now when I talk about layers, a lot of you business owners may say, okay, layers sounds expensive, right? Because now you're telling me I got to go buy 50 different tools to protect my organization. So it's really about coming up with a balance between what your protection that you want in place and what the budget is. And some protection can cause inefficiencies. If they have to enter 15 different codes to get into something, if your employees are wasting 30 minutes a day on some sort of cybersecurity thing, then it can be also inefficient. So it's about finding that balance between efficiency, how much protection we're going to have in place, and what is our budget for this. And every single company is different, and that is depending on what kind of data you have, how you're accessing that data. So it's really about having those conversations with your IT to really understand where your biggest threats are and how you can mitigate those threats for the lowest amount of budget possible, to keep it reasonable. Right. So going into just a few of the specific areas, and so these are going to be some of these areas that I'm going to talk about are just little check boxes. And at the end, feel free to take notes. But at the end, I'm also going to give you a little summary of the highlights that we're going to talk about, and we're going to give you a checklist of things to look at, that you can take that checklist back to your IT and really have those conversations about these things. But what I want to talk about now is just some of the solutions, some of the areas that you really want to focus on. I'm definitely not going to be able to hit all the areas of cybersecurity in this short webinar, for sure. Like I said, I could teach a week class on this. So really, we're just going to hit some of the main highlights of the areas that you might want to talk about to start with, if you don't have solutions in place. So securing your communications is probably one of the first areas that you really want to look at. That's your emails, and now specifically, you've got your Teams, you got your Zoom, those kind of things, all your remote communications. You want to ensure that these are secure. Some of the questions to ask: are we sending sensitive information? If we are, an encryption solution of some kind should definitely be used, because when we just send a regular email, it's not encrypted by default, right? So it can be intercepted, and that sensitive information can be taken unless we send it encrypted. Is our email protecting against hacking and phishing, right? So this is the making sure that we have multi-factor authentication on our emails. We highly recommend, if you don't have multi-factor on your email today, that might be a good one to put the checklist on there. It's really easy to do. Every email system out there has that capability built in. It's just a matter of turning it on. So we definitely recommend that. And then again, the phishing emails, many email solutions out there, either there's third-party solutions. If you're on Office 365, they have built-in phishing prevention. Now, it doesn't get all of them. It certainly can't catch all of them, but it can catch a lot, and it kind of help stem the tide of those attacks coming in. And then when you click on a link, how do you know you're going to a malicious website or not? Does your email look at those links to determine if this website is malicious? And if you click on it, are you going to get a notice that say, hey, this is possibly malicious? So we'll talk a little bit more about, kind of firewalls and different kind of things that you can have in place to kind of help you know whether you're going to a malicious website or not. And keep in mind, when we're talking about access to emails and sensitive information and access to, maybe in Teams we're sending some confidential information, you're only strong as the weakest link. So if you have a phone that doesn't have a PIN on it or a password, or you downloaded that a cool flashlight app from the Android or Apple store that has malware, your weakest link is whatever your weakest link is the link into your systems. So, making sure that your employee's phone and that your phone have passwords on it and antivirus on it, for example, to make sure that you're not giving access to those systems. So, a couple little statistics there. 1 out of every 101 emails is malicious. I think that everyone has experienced that, right? Hopefully some of them go into spam, but they're constantly coming in. In the first one there, 91% of cybercrime starts with email. So that's why we really harp a lot on making sure that your email is secure, because a lot of attacks come through email. right? And 1% may not seem like a lot, but 1%, that means that 1 out of every 100 websites you go to are infected with malware. And very often, not even the company that has that website knows that their website is infected with malware. We see that often with our clients, that they won't even know. One of their clients will call them up and say, "Hey, your website just had me download this weird thing." And so making sure that your website, is also your own website, but also making sure when you're going to other websites that you're aware of that threat. So, this is just a quick slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but this is really just showing that there's really are two main different ways of attacks. We think of traditional cybersecurity as that malware based, those viruses, worms, like I talked about, ransomware, adware, Trojans. That's what we think of like the traditional, but very often what they're finding is with the tools in place is often those viruses are the ones that are easily, not easily, but can be mitigated through antivirus and advanced antivirus and a few of those things. But there is a huge increase in malware-less attacks. That's those, impersonation. That's the CEO fraud. That's those whaling and spear phishing and harvesting your credentials and those kind of things that are not necessarily just putting viruses on your computer. So those are those other attacks that we really want to think about. So I'll talk a little bit, and I mentioned this, of course, you have the challenge of remote workers working on their personal computers. If those personal computers have access to secure company data, are those computers secure? Are those computers protected? And so what I want to talk about is just a few of the things that you want to have in place for all of your systems, both in the office and if you have home computers that are accessing secure data and they're not remoting into a remote system. You want to make sure that they're secure. And so the three, the main parts that you want to look at are patching. And you'll hear us IT people talk about, is your computer patched? Is it up to date? That is extremely important because, Microsoft, for example, and even Apple, when they release those updates, it then becomes public knowledge. Right? They say, hey, we found this bug on this in Windows 10 that if the hacker does this exact sequence of events that they can get in. Many a times at that point, most hackers didn't even know that it existed. But once it becomes public knowledge and once that patch is released, now every hacker in the world knows it. So most of those exploits happen after the patch is already released. So it's very important that that you keep your system up to date and that it's being monitored for that, right? Because we definitely see this across our, hundreds of endpoints that we manage. Occasionally, Microsoft patches will fail and need to be redone or something like that. And if it's not being monitored, if it's not being ensured that, hey, are we 100% patched? Do we know we are patched, or are we leaving ourselves open unnecessarily? So ensuring your systems are patched and up to date, very important. Antivirus is something that has definitely evolved over time as well. So we all know, we've all heard McAfee and the main ones out there that you've heard that has been around forever. That is what we call a traditional antivirus. We use WebRoot in-house. And how a traditional antivirus works is it has this big definition of all the different viruses that it's seen. It knows what they are. It creates a list of what they call hashes that says these are all known viruses that we're aware of. And that's why you hear your antivirus got definition updates. Those definition updates are known viruses. The challenge with definition updates are what we call zero-day attacks. Zero-day attacks are essentially viruses that have never been seen before. Okay, and often ransomware is a zero-day attack. Like I mentioned, those are becoming targeted. So they actually make the virus for that organization that they're attacking. Often you'll see the virus name as a kind of a part of the name or an abbreviation of the company name. And when that virus hits your computer, your standard antivirus has no clue. It's never seen this before. It doesn't know that it's a virus. And because it doesn't match that definition, it's just going to ignore it. It's just going to be an unknown and let it go. So we have put in what we call advanced antivirus that uses threat intelligence and artificial intelligence. And the biggest difference is, and I'll give you, there's kind of two main ones out there. We use a product called Sentinel-1. There is another one called Carbon Black. There are a few others out there. Sophos has some, but the main difference is that it uses artificial intelligence and machine learning. So the difference is when a virus, a 0-day virus, gets on your computer, the advanced antivirus software will analyze what it's doing. It'll analyze its behavior. It sets up honeypots on your computer, so it sets up fake files to be a bait for the virus. And if the moment that it starts trying to alter those files, or if it starts behaving like what we might expect a virus to behave, it will immediately shut that down, disconnect the computer from the network, and quarantine that so that it doesn't spread to the rest of your organization. So advanced antivirus is something that is, I would say, is relatively brand new. It's only been out really for a few years. It's only really become kind of mainline in the last couple of years. But this is something that we have implemented into our clients, and it's pretty much just part of our stack now. We use both traditional antivirus, and the advanced antivirus. So definitely want to look at that and think about adding that to your organization. And then, but for both of these things, really monitoring it. So you'll hear the term NOC, SOC, that's your Network Operations Center, or your Security Operations Center. This is making sure that if an attacks are happening, that they are being monitored and you can respond. Often, if you just put the tools in place but don't monitor it, the attacks can happen, but there needs to be a response to that. So if an attack happens, sometimes an IT person might need to get in there and clean it up, or in some cases, if it's ransomware, that computer really should be completely wiped and reloaded in case they put a backdoor of some kind on there. So really monitoring those attacks and ensuring that the system is properly cleaned afterward is very important. All right, so just talk a little bit more about kind of firewall, gateway, VPN. There's a couple different things to this, and this is both in your office as well as at home. There's a couple different products out there. Cisco has a DNS product that will help for your home users, but we'll often use a content filter or firewall in your office. And this is just to make sure that if you open up a website, is that website checked? So is your firewall checking websites? Is it really filtering those, or is it just a basic firewall from the provider? This gives you the tools that you need for detecting and preventing, but also really monitoring. So if you have what we call a unified threat gateway or advanced firewall, it's logging that. So you'll hear terms like intrusion detection and intrusion prevention. So it is looking at what's coming into your system and really detecting and preventing breaches, as opposed to just being a firewall that's not monitored. It doesn't log those things. So definitely something to talk with your IT. Do you have an advanced firewall, or are you using the provider, what's provided by Frontier, for example? It's definitely something to look at and can add a huge layer of security. Of course, VPN with remote workers, if they're accessing data, if they're accessing computers, definitely want to go through a VPN. So if you have users that are using Microsoft's remote desktop, if you're doing that over the internet, that is definitely not secure, and those systems can be compromised pretty easily if that's open on the WAN. So making sure that you're going through your systems with a VPN through a proper gateway, very important. And I like to explain what those advanced gateways really do. Is kind of like your Frontier modem, your provider's modem. It's kind of like getting on a bus, right? You get on the bus, You've got your ticket. The bus driver is going to make sure, punch your ticket or take your ticket. Make sure, maybe you don't have an RPG strapped to your back, make sure you don't have any obvious weapons on you or anything, but you're not going to be scanned. You're not going to be looked at. That's kind of how a traditional, just basic firewall works. It's not going to let the obvious stuff in. But, if you want to hide something, you can certainly get past that security. Whereas these advanced firewalls, these advanced gateways, a little more like going through the TSA, right? And where you're getting a full body scan and they're seeing, are you bringing anything in? So, very important to kind of look at that. Training and education. And I know I've got just a few more slides. I know we've got just about 15 minutes. I definitely want to leave time for a question. So I'm going to try to get through these last few slides as quickly as I can. I apologize. I can definitely talk all day if you give me the opportunity. So I'll try to get through these last ones pretty quick here. It's important that that we make sure that our employees are trained to understand what the attack's out there, and so they don't click on these emails, right? One of the most important training out there is understanding what a phishing email looks like. What are the few things that I need to look at when I'm looking at a phishing email? For example, am I looking at the from email address to see if this is some random email or if it's actually coming from the person I'm expecting it to? If this says that it's an Amazon link, am I mousing over that link to determine if that's actually taking me to Amazon.com or some other Amazon-shipping.com, for example, which is not an official Amazon site? Am I looking at the attachment to say, is this a legitimate attachment? Is it a zip file? Should I download this to my computer? Should I scan this first? Likely. So, really giving your employees the tools to understand what attacks are out there. They can be short. They, often I'll get that kind of bounce back from our clients is, man, I cannot get all my employees to sit on training for hours a day. Well, you can just send them a quick 3-minute video that hits the highlights so that they can be educated on those things. So there's a lot of great companies out there. KnowBe4 has great training. WebRoot has good training. There's lots of different great training. And then also a lot of those systems will have the capability for you to test your employees as well. So you can send fake phishing emails to your organization and see who clicks on it, right? And if they click on it, that gives you the opportunity to go ahead and say, hey, here's some additional training. Here's the reasons why you shouldn't have clicked on this phishing email. Yes, this came from us, and this time it wasn't a virus, but next time it could be. So ensuring that your employees are trained and tested to ensure that they are the front line against protection for your organization. Not going to spend too much time on this. Again, this is just making sure kind of goes off of the training, but do we have policies in place about how our employees should be using computers? How, what is their computer usage policy? What are they allowed to do when they're in the office or working, and this is a lot more when they're working remotely. What can and can't they do? Do you have it stated that they can't go to certain websites during office hours? Otherwise, you might end up in a case where that employee goes to a particular website or does something and it wasn't against any policy, right? So it's important to have, social media policy, what can and can't you post? We've seen plenty of news articles about that. And then I'll talk a little bit more about disaster recovery policy. What do you do if you do get hit by something? So a little bit more on the file access and password policies. This is a really important part of what is defined. Do we have a minimum access policy? Are we only giving access to what they need to have access to, or do we give that new intern access to all company data, including accounting? While we may trust that person completely, what it does is open up a lot for the hackers, right? If that particular computer is compromised, that person has access to way more than they need access to, and that means the hacker has access to way more than they need access to. So ensuring that we're only giving access to what they need to have access to and nothing more will reduce that threat. Define those activities. What should your employees be avoiding online? Sometimes it's obvious to us. Of course, you shouldn't be going to random, conspiracy theory sites while at work, but it may not be obvious. So ensuring that that's defined. How do we handle our customers' information. How do we handle that personally identifiable information and sensitive data in the organization? Are we allowed to email it? Are we not allowed to email it? Are we to upload it to certain websites? Can we, what is the proper way to send that to the client? The client's requesting it. How do I release that information securely? That is also important to define. So a little bit on the passwords, because passwords are, incredibly important, but, you'll see me talk about two-factor authentication. But what we find is, and this is the statistics, is 59% of small businesses do not have visibility into their employee passwords, right? So it is, hey, go create your account. They create their password, and the employer has no idea about what kind of password that employee is using. It literally could just be password one. And often we see this. I've worked with clients over the years. We'll get in and, I'll work with one particular user and I'll say, okay, let's talk about your password. This particular account was compromised. What password were you using? Password 123. Okay, well, that was our problem, right? So ensuring that we have strong passwords. We're not password sharing, right? So we're not using the same password for multiple accounts, and we're not sharing that password with other employees. Each person has their own password for accountability. Two-factor authentication, again, huge. Making sure that we have that second factor to ensure if the password is compromised, that the account itself is not compromised. And password management solutions such as LastPass, OnePass, there's lots of different ones out there. If you Google password management, there's a lot of great solutions out there that can help you manage your passwords. So you can put one password in your password management solution, back that up with two-factor authentication, and it can log you into all your sites for you, and that lets you have the ability to have a different dynamic password to each site. That is definitely what we recommend. Definitely take a look at LastPass. For personal use, LastPass is free. So just go check out lastpass.com. Try it out just with your personal stuff, and you can also do it for business. So what makes a good password? Try not to use personal information, address, birthday, kids, phone number, those kind of things. Those things can be found on social media. And if you're being targeted by a whale attack, they can take that information, throw it into an algorithm, and come up with all kinds of great password guesses. So try not to use information like that. One example I do here is, trying to come up with how do you not use English words, or how do you not use those kind of things in your password, is come up with like a sentence. So this password here that I see, it looks crazy. And how am I ever going to remember this? But what this is I like to walk my dog every day! Exclamation at, right? So while this password is crazy complicated, it's a sentence that I can remember. And so that is something, a good opportunity there is come up with a phrase to make your password. You can come up with a really great password. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to roll through these last couple of slides pretty quickly. So I apologize for talking fast because I'm
Unknown
kinda running out of
participant
time.
is
But
now exiting.
make sure that you have an incident response or disaster recovery plan. What happens if we are attacked? Talk to your IT company. Are we doing regular fire drills? And what is the plan? If we get hit by an attack today, who's doing what? Who's responsible for what? Who's going to call the insurance company? What is the plan? How quickly can we recover, and how far can we go back? Do we have a backup every week? Are we going to lose a week of data? Are we going to be back up in an hour, or is it going to take us a week? These are all questions to ask in your disaster recovery plan. So last slide, this is just the review. This is the highlights, just to kind of take everything. I know I've been talking really, really fast, but to take everything and kind of put it in a summary. So while I'm going through this, take your questions, throw it in the chat, and we'll have a few minutes for questions. Be glad to stay on a little late if anybody wants some more time. But, these are the main points. Ensure your email and communication systems are secured, strong passwords and multi-factor. Secure your endpoints with patching and advanced AV that is being monitored. Allow remote access to company resource should be secured by VPN and strong passwords, right? So all that company access to your sensitive information, definitely want to look at that. Give your employees the training they need to be that frontline defense, and those company policies will ensure that your employees know what's expected of them. And all users have strong passwords avoid password reuse, and consider one of those password management solutions, and have that plan in case of disaster. Those are those main things to look at. We are going to send, we have this available for you. We have a great PDF that kind of has a checklist of a lot of these things that I talked about. Some of them I didn't talk about. So if you have any questions, I'll pass back to AD. If you have any other, want to dive deeper into any of these things, we are definitely available. Can get on a one-on-one call with you and talk about any one of these individual things with you and give you some tips on that. But we do have a PDF that'll give you this great checklist, give you an opportunity to take this to your IT and talk to them about these things. And that's about it. So we'll switch to question and answer. So any questions?
All right, Alex, I know you gave it, and I do an orientation. I say I feed people with, through a fire hose, and I think I just had it happen to me. Just all this information that came down. I think one of the questions was, will this be made available? The whole broadcast would be made available versus the slide, so you could be able to go back over everything he said, slow it down, pause it, and put that back in there. So I think we did have a few questions come up. Can ransomware be transferred to an external hard drive?
Absolutely. Any drive, both network or USB, if it is connected to that computer and that computer has access to it, if the computer has access to it, the ransomware also has access to it. Absolutely.
All right. If a small company doesn't have a server, if a small company doesn't have a server, should they save files to multiple external hard drives or flash drives to avoid potential infiltration?
Ooh, I'd probably say neither. So if a small business does not have a server that has those in a central location, then I'd definitely look at some other type of solution. It could be what we call a network attached storage, which is essentially kind of like a network drive that is just without the full amount of the server. Or if I didn't have a server, if I was a small business, I'd probably look at cloud file solutions that I can secure and manage, such as Amazon, Amazon Files, Google Cloud, Microsoft's OneDrive. Those I can protect and I can manage as an organization. If I have data on USB drives and distributed in different locations, often those USB drives will get lost. I can't really centrally manage it as IT. So I want something that I can really control and ensure that I have control and know where that data is.
Right. I know you talked about backing up and servers, disaster recovery, and I think sometimes you need to go back into those disaster recovery files and make sure they copy, because sometimes you think it's there and then when disaster happens, it doesn't. So if you have a disaster recovery plan, you have data, how often should you check to make sure your data, if something was to happen, that it would,
Absolutely. Yeah. We often say the absolute worst time to find out your backup's no good is when you need it, right? That is not a good time to find out that the backup is no good. So it's important that there's a couple different things. We like to do fire drills about once a month. But we have systems in place that will monitor to ensure that the backup is completed without failure. Right. So I would say not so much, those fire drills where you really say, okay, we're crashed. What are we going to do? And go through your disaster recovery plan is important to do. Every once in a while, it may be once a month, it may be once a quarter, but really ensuring that your backup solution is being monitored is the important thing. Because I want to know if I had a backup fail last night, I want to know last night because I want to fix it that night or the next morning. So I would say, whatever you're using to back up, ensure that that's being monitored and any failures are being looked at immediately.
All right. Well, I know time is winding down. I want to thank you. And AD, again, that's a lot of information that's there. And I know every situation is different, because I know with us cutting over and, how secure is the OneDrives and putting your stuff virtually. I know a long time ago it wasn't really secure. I think things have gotten better. And not only backing up, but
now
backing
exiting.
up at multiple locations, that way, something happens. So again, I want to thank you guys, the team, for coming on. And I think AD is going to tell us what our next.
Yes. Thanks again for hanging in with us. And I knew what to be expect, that this would be overwhelming in some ways. It's a lot of information, and we can pick a topic, and Alice can spend a day on that topic. So, what I do want you to know that, please, if you want us to slow this down and have just a one-on-one, just reach out to us. Let us know, and I'll be glad to set up a consultation with you. Displaying there is my information, my email, as well as a number to contact me, and just follow up, and I'll set something up. I'll be glad to. I'll be more than happy to spend that time with you. So, and keeping in mind of the time, I'm getting ready to exit, but I would just like to for you to know, next week we'll be speaking on ways and benefits of utilizing an IT MSP, a managed service provider. So that pretty much tells you, based on what I was talking about earlier, of having someone to sort of help be that IT environment for you. So be glad to speak on that. So I'm going to let you go at this time. Thanks for joining. I think this was great. Thanks for hanging in there, and I will see you next week at 1 p.m.